Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. By the way, you should know how to spell that by now, but I keep repeating it every single time. Don't forget, you can read my work on Altogether Now, ESPN.com. And if you missed my story earlier this week, I had a story about how this team has turned it around in just 1 year, not just kind of looking at like the way Dan Quinn runs his meetings and why they are important, the way and what it means to the players, the arrival of Ertz and Wagner, little things that they do that really translate well to leadership and success. And then of course, the arrival of number 5. So it's all in there, and give that a read. Now, also on Friday, I have a story up on kicker Zane Gonzalez and the OCD that he has to deal with. And I know it's been a topic. It was a topic before. He's talked about it before. I know he talked to Nikki earlier in the week about it, but he talked about it again on Thursday. Had a chance to ask him a bunch of questions about it, and it was really interesting and really good and insightful. So give that a read. It's up on ESPN.com right now. So anyway, before I get to my 5 things I think about another playoff game, how about that, folks? Um, let's go back to August. Were you thinking this back in August when I started doing these? I don't know. But anyways, here we are, and it's a good thing for this franchise and for you. So anyway, before I get there, a couple things. Injuries. Bobby Wagner's a go. You probably heard that by now. It was never really in doubt. Zane Gonzalez said he feels fine. He's got the hip. The one who was added to the list yesterday on Thursday was linebacker Michael Walker. Now, the only reason he's got an illness, the only reason why that would be significant, or not the main reason to be significant, is because they're going to be without Jordan McGee, who's got a hamstring injury. Dan Quinn said earlier in the week that he wouldn't play. So if you don't want to lose Walker because they kind of do some of the same things. So I think that's something to watch there. But again, it was an illness. I don't know. Anyways, so but this is a pretty healthy team at this point in the season, and that's a very good thing. So the other thing I want to talk about, one of the things they did today, the coaches today, it's Thursday as I'm recording this. So on Thursday, all the coaches in practice were wearing their Doug Williams, like a legacy t-shirt, something. If you saw a picture of Dan Quinn, maybe I'll put this up here on YouTube. But the Dan Quinn t-shirt that he wore last week, this is what they were all wearing today. So quite a tribute. Williams, of course, is an honorary captain for the team during the postseason. And then later during a team meeting, everybody in the meeting was wearing a 17 jersey. And Doug Williams came in, they gave him a standing ovation. Like, one of the things I'm really happy for Doug Williams, when I'm done covering this stuff, the number one person that I will tell people that I've been happy to get to know is Doug Williams. It's been an absolute joy and pleasure talking to him over the years. And I learn a lot, but I also just enjoy the conversations because he's just a good guy, as humble as they come, understands his significance in history, understands his significance to the franchise, but he doesn't wear it like he's better than someone. He just understands it, he embraces it, and that's who he is. And it's just been an absolute joy. So I'm happy to see him back in the forefront of this organization. He was kind of pushed to the side the last several years, and that was, for a few things and by a few people. But he's back, and he's in a good role for him, more than just a guy that they trot out to announce the team name or whatever it is. So, but he's got a good role here, and I think it's deserved. But the respect is very, very earned, and they have showered him with it this year. And so I think that's been a good thing to see. I think it's also Jayden Daniels being here. You saw his first press conference after the draft. He talked about Doug Williams. He's talked about him at other times, and he talks about what he means to him. And I think, and it's genuine. It's not just lip service. And he will talk to him. Like, he stops and talks to him throughout, at various times. Always says hello to him, whatever. So I'm happy for Doug that he's getting that level of respect that he deserves. All right, so let's get to my 5 things I think. One, I think it's hard to fully explain to others outside here why this team has done so well. And it's funny because, again, I can point to a lot of reasons. It's not just Jayden Daniels drives this engine. We all know that. But there's something here that was here before he even arrived. And it's just, I was talking to a player about this on Thursday, and he said that when he came here, he signed here in the offseason, one of the number of new players here. And he said he told his wife after he came here the first time, just he goes, this place is remarkable. It was just a different tone, a different vibe, a different energy. And I even told him, like, as somebody who's in the media, been around this place for a long time, you could feel it. You could feel the energy. And I also know that anytime there's a change in coaches and all that, there's always a different energy. It was different this time. And I think people who've been around know it was different, but you still don't know what it means. But the point is, like, it started with that. There was just an energy and a vibe that came through that was really, really good for this franchise. And it's turned into a magical season. So, and it's funny because one of the things I think that definitely think that people here understand that they are playing with house money. And, but that doesn't mean I was talking again, I was talking about this with a player and another coach and kind of brought up that phrase, like, this is house money. The difference is, like, they're not just happy to be here. They're not walking around saying, like, look what we've accomplished so far. Look what we've accomplished. Like, I've never gotten that sense from them that they feel like this is where it ends. Like that, okay, hey, you won a playoff game for the first time since 2005 season. Boy, isn't that great? Let's go, whatever happens from here out, whatever. That's not what I sense. But the house money part comes in. We all know that this is ahead of schedule. So you go do whatever you do this year. Like, this is the start of something. It's not the window closing on some run and you have to get it done now. This is a start. But I also say, like, you have guys like Terry McLaurin's been here for a while, John Allen. Like, you think they want this to end? Bobby Wagner, he likes titles. Zach Ertz, he likes titles. Austin Eckler, he's been around. Like, he doesn't want this end. So this is not a young team that's just happy to be here. This is a new team that's ecstatic to be here, but understands that it has a chance to do something more. It's that belief that I think is a difference. And it's really hard to, when you talk to people about it, it's really hard to put into, like, how much does that make a difference? Well, I think it makes a lot. And it's funny because I asked Dan Quinn on Friday, like, it really seems like this team embraces the moment. And I think Quinn does it as well. I think there's a trickle down effect. Quinn embraces whatever moment they're in. If it's adversity, he's going to embrace it because he said, hey, listen, when you come out on the other side, you're going to be better for it. So really take this on. If it's success, like, hey, you've got to, this is great, but you got to learn. You have a chance to learn something here to make yourself better. So that's where I think this team takes that approach. But then, as he said, they embrace the moments because they've had success in them. And one time after another leads to success, to the point where I was talking to a defensive player. He said that after they kicked the after Tampa kicked the game tying field goal the other night, he's like, nobody was really all that upset. He said they're on the sidelines, they're kind of joking and laughing a little bit. Not that they didn't care, but they knew. They knew what was going to happen. And they had confidence in what was going to happen. In other words, it didn't get them down. It wasn't so much that they didn't care. Again, it was that it didn't get them down. And they were upbeat. And this is like, when you, like, these are things that you can't see on TV or can't see from the press box. But this was the vibe on the sidelines from guys that were down there. And then when you see Jayden Daniels with the ball, that's what people say, like, what'd you think? Well, we're going to win because it's Jayden Daniels and he have the ball and this offense doesn't. That belief really goes a long way. And I think, as another player told me, like, they can do this, this, and this. He said, but when you have a guy like Jayden, you always have a chance. So that belief goes a long way. The togetherness, and as Dan Quinn said earlier this week, it's brotherhood, not neighborhood. When it's brotherhood, you're together. You're always together. Like, guys, this group has been going. Guys in position groups have been going out all year, doing things. They always, the specialists would get together, the linemen get together, et cetera. So the linebackers go in and study a lot together. So there's a lot of that going on, and that's when you have guys who can bring you along like that. When it matters who the guy next to you, how they do, it just elevates your whole level of play. The talent gap in the NFL is not that severe for most teams, especially if you have a good quarterback, and they do. So what can get you to that next level? This definitely helps. Now, they still need to bolster this roster for the future. We know that. It's not you can't do anything right now. So you're going to ride with what you have. And what you have is a talented as hell quarterback and a team that believes in itself and a coaching staff that believes in its players. And it makes such a huge difference in sports. You know that. Like, confidence, you would think that guys in the NFL would always have confidence, but they're all human, man. Like, if you're struggling, you're doing this, you may lose some of that. So you've got to be able to get it back. And how do you get it back? And one of the things, too, that I like that this team did, and this is from Dan Quinn, He wants accountability. But one way they did that is by putting the onus on the players to come up with the standards for the team. And he got together with, it was all the veterans, the rookies weren't a part of this. It was all back in the spring. So the veterans came up with the standards that they need to adhere to. And I was talking to Jeremy Reeves about this. Well, I said, how has it played out? He goes, I asked him, are there times where guys get reminded? He goes, of course. He goes, like, hey, like he said, he'll tell guys, this is what we signed. This is what you agreed to. This is what you have to do because you agreed to it. And when you have all that, it makes a difference. Dan Quinn during these movies will show pictures of Mount Everest and show like the base camp and like where they need to get to. He said, but we're right here right now. And always down at the bottom at that base camp because you've got to keep climbing that mountain. And I think, is that, that's a motivational thing, whatever, but it's also a reminder that, what you did last week, you're still back down here because you've got to keep climbing up. And I think like all that's the mentality that you have can take you a long way. And then when you add in a guy like Jayden Daniels, you just can't put a limit on what a team can do. At this point, would anything surprise you about what they did? Maybe surprise a little bit if you get through and do this, but would you really be surprised? Because they have shown what they can do when they're capable. Now, Detroit's a really good team. Detroit goes in the game as the better team, period. Like that's nothing wrong to say that. They're 15-2 for a reason. They have earned that. But, when you're going up against a team like that, you don't have to beat them 5, 6, 7 times. You have to beat them once. And that's one thing that Dan Quinn has talked about. And I think that's where this team understands that, and in Sundays, and this time, in this case, a Saturday, anything can happen. 1 or 2 plays can change it. Can you make those 1 or 2 plays? But it's a mature team. Listen, this is what Zach Ertz told us the other day. What he likes is how mature this team is. This is what he had to say.
We got a mature group, even though we got a lot of guys that haven't necessarily had a ton of playoff games under their belt. The group is very mature in how they approach the game, how they exhaust the process. And for me, that's been one of the most fun things about being here is a lot of guys that love the game. They love going to work every day. They love exhausting themselves and being their best each and every week. And so for me, that's why I've loved being here from the moment I got here, is because of the group of guys we have, the maturity we have. And so nothing really needs to be said.
Okay, so number 2. I think there are a lot of similarities between what Washington has created and what Detroit has created under Dan Campbell. And it's funny because I think I told you this, but they share the same agent. And it's no surprise that their agent would look for similar guys, and like they are unicorns in the way they do things. I think, it's funny because they even asked him like, hey man, NFL, other teams are going to be looking for guys like this who really know how to set a tone and change a culture. His comment was like, these guys are unicorns. They're unique. Like it's very hard to find guys like this. But Dan Campbell went up and now he did it in a much different way. And I think he had, I think early on, he was kind of like looked at like kind of quizzically, like, who the hell is this guy? But it's worked and he knows what he wants. I think that's the thing too, is you set standards, you know what you want, you know what you're looking for. Listen, Anthony Lynn was there. He was the OC up there in his first year, and it didn't work. And what the offense he was running is not what Dan Campbell wanted. So that's why he ended up changing them. And I think Anthony Lynn's a very smart offensive coach, but it wasn't working. And Dan Campbell knew what he had the vision for what he wanted. And I think Dan Quinn has that same vision. And I think there's an intentionality of how you go setting up something as well. And I think that's one thing Quinn does. Listen, I don't think Washington is at the same point as where Detroit is, but Washington's starting from a much better spot than what Detroit was a couple years ago. Like Detroit wasn't in the playoffs in Campbell's first year. Like they were bad, but they finished strong. But I think it was the standards that were set, et cetera. So I think when you look at this, I think Washington is closer to where Detroit is right now than certainly when they were at in the beginning. They're much further ahead than what Detroit was when Campbell started, but they're in a good spot. And I think when you look at it like, you'd like to see them be able to add some guys in the offseason to add some of that speed Detroit has on offense, and with Gibbs and with Jameson Williams. Give somebody else next to McLaurin who's got that kind of speed, who can really can really kind of impact how a defense plays you and then make it better for everybody else. And you got a quarterback who can get him the ball, who will get him the ball. I think, could you imagine a guy like Jameson Williams in this offense? Like with we have McLaurin on one side and you got him running. Oh my God, it would be incredible. So they can get there. They're pretty close. They're much closer than that than I would have thought 8 weeks ago. So that's a good thing. Like, and again, I credit not just a lot of it's Daniels, but I credit a lot of other stuff. But it's, I think they have their offensive coordinator in Cliff Kingsbury. Campbell didn't have that right away. They have the young QB. I mean, Goff needed some repair work when he got to Detroit. Um, they've made the playoffs already. They've won a playoff game. This is just incredible. And it's two franchises that have meant a lot to the NFL. And obviously Washington's had much more recent success, but it hasn't been, but in terms of the NFL, but not recent for most of these generations. Like neither franchise has really done anything in a long time. So it's kind of cool that they're playing, and not just cool that they're playing, but cool that they have staying power with this. Like even if Ben Johnson leaves, I think Detroit will be okay. It's funny because like two of the coaches that this team was interested in, obviously last year, were Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn impressed them with his leadership. I talked to people about him during the process who really liked. He was an NFL corner. Like it's hard for corners to be considered leaders, but that's what Glenn is. And that I think he's a lot more like the Quinn Campbell type than a guy like Ben Johnson, who is very smart and very good play caller. We know that. I'll get to some of that in a minute. And by the way, we know that he wasn't coming here, had nothing to do with who was at quarterback or what they're going to do at quarterback. It was about the fact that he wanted to stay in Detroit. I'm not sure that he felt he was ready to be a head coach. I remember talking to somebody from another team who knows people in Detroit. And it was like, that was the word there. Like he just felt like there was more to do in Detroit and wanted to accomplish. So you've heard a lot of stuff over the last year, over the last week, maybe. Hmm, that's not, there's too many rumors out there and too many people trying to spread them. So just be careful with what you believe about it. But I will say that you know, when he told the mistake Ben Johnson made was texting him while they're on the way and to Detroit. Fortunately for Washington, they still went to Detroit to talk to Aaron Glenn, but that was a bad look. And we'll see what happens with Ben Johnson. But the point is, he was a guy they liked, deservedly so. He's a hell of a play caller. He's really fun to watch with that. But what I will say too, and we've talked about this before, I don't know, this team is not where it is if they had hired Ben Johnson, because you're not going to have Bobby Wagner. You don't have Zach Ertz. You don't have Cliff Kingsbury. So, do you have the same kind of staff? Like it would have been much, much different, and you would have had a first-time GM with a first-time head coach. I don't know that that's always the way to go. And so I think they're in a good spot. But again, I will say this, and I've said this before. I said it last year, said it again. Dan Quinn was always pretty damn high on that list. And there were definitely people in the room who are key decision makers who liked him quite a bit all from the jump. So anyways, just another time to go down memory lane with that whole fiasco at times. So but again, just there's a lot of similarities here, and they're not. And I think the mindset of these teams too are very similar. I think there's a strong belief. There's a strong belief in their culture, and I think that word culture gets used a lot when you're talking about teams. And you heard John Jansen talking about it on the podcast on Thursday. If you listen to it, if you didn't, go back and listen to it. But when culture gets thrown around a lot, we heard that the last 5 years or 4 years under Ron Rivera, and it didn't really in the building. There were times in the locker room I felt like it was a pretty good situation. It was not remotely close to this. Like it was this thing this year is miles ahead of where it was. Like and really last year was the year where it really cratered. Before then, it wasn't bad and it was improving. Like I think there are a lot of things they liked, but there were still underlying issues at various position groups that didn't help. But this year you're not hearing any of that stuff. And I think having strong leaders like that makes a big difference. But that the culture, the ability to set that and change that is hard to do. And I think in the building, it's just different too. And it starts like, again, this player was telling me, it's like it starts with the ownership. Like the ownership down, you feel it when you come in the building. And before you felt it in a different way. And I remember when, when the Shanahans came here, like the word, like they got here and they realized like they felt like Dan Snyder was going to spend a lot of money. Then they got here and they realized how unhappy people were here and that he didn't spend money on the things that maybe the infrastructure of the organization that can make a difference for people who work there as well. So all that stuff matters. They got it going on now. But make no mistake here, the key element for this program is Dan Quinn. And I think that's just what you just have to always keep in mind. And the other thing is, again, I always bring up, and I'm rambling on number two on the second thought here, but Kingsbury is a guy that feels rejuvenated as well, right? Well, he told his brother in the spring how happy he was to be here. This is before Jayden Daniels was here. So he was already in that mode. Now, he also knew chances are they're going to take him at that point, and he liked him a lot at that point. So maybe that was part of it, but I think he just liked being in this place. And it's funny that, folks, in less than a year, this organization has become a place that people will want to play for. Anyway, number 3, I think Jayden Daniels' composure is going to be key Saturday night. And that's something that I talked earlier about, embracing moments. He clearly does that. He loves the 2-minute situations, the 4-minute situations, any level of competition he wants to be part of. And, he loved playing in front of big crowds in college. Like, that's why it's going to be a raucous atmosphere in Ford Field. It's going to be a fun atmosphere in Ford Field. If you're a competitor, you're going to welcome it. Yes, it's going to be loud. Yes, you're going to have to handle the noise, the operation of the play, et cetera, the silence, the silent counts, all that stuff. And on defense, you're going to have to, a lot of signals too, even though it's on, be there on offense, it's still kind of loud in there at times. So you've got to really do a good job communicating, knowing how to communicate. And that's something Jayden Daniels have to do. But played in the SEC. You play in a lot of big stadiums, and it's funny because I don't know, you hear from people like he knows that like the NFL stadiums typically aren't going to be as bad as what you would face in some of the bigger college stadiums. He played in front of more than 100,000 people at Texas A&M. That's quite a feat, or it's quite an experience. So I don't think he's going to be rattled in this situation. I don't think he's ever been rattled. And, it's funny because I had Brian Johnson call him a silent assassin, because just the way he's able to stay cool and just go out there and slay you is just that he lives for moments like what he's going to experience on Saturday. And I think that makes the difference. Like playing in the SEC and those big atmosphere games really will help him in this kind of an atmosphere. But again, I don't think he would have been, it's just not who he is. Like, it's funny because he was asked, here, I'll say this, before I get to this quote by Jayden, I talked to Zach Ertz about this too, after practice on Wednesday, I think it was. I'm losing track of the days here, folks. But on Wednesday, I talked to Ertz and said, we were talking about Jayden Daniels and like what he remembers from him in the spring, because I'm curious about the people's first impressions. When did you know this kid was different? And he said he could tell in the spring because just the work he would put in and the way he retained the work. He said to the point where at this point in the spring, he was working with the number 2s, right? Now, you may have thought, and I may have thought, that Jayden Daniels is going to be the starter. These guys are veterans. Like, they've seen rookies come in who don't come in and do anything. Like, they're not sitting there watching all these college games and scouting and going over all this stuff. It's like, okay, yeah, we all know all that. What happens when you get to the NFL? That's what matters. So they've all been a part of situations like, yeah, the guy coming in isn't quite what people said. So you have to wait and see. But in the spring, he knew right away, like, this kid's different. In fact, he told me, you know who he told me he reminded of with his composure, his demeanor, his work ethic, etc., was Andrew Luck. Now, Ertz played with Andrew Luck in college. So, but the other thing he said Ertz talked about, like, Daniels was working with the second team offense. So there were times in like a 2-minute situation, Ertz wanted to go work with the second team offense in the spring because he knew Daniels would eventually get that job. So he wanted to have time with him. So that's just a smart veteran type guy, but it also speaks to what they thought of Daniels way back when and we're seeing playing now. Anyways, Daniels was asked earlier this week if he gets nervous ever before games, and this is what he had to say about that.
On a football field?
I don't know. I won't say like nervous, but I think like you just get butterflies. I kind of just, my dad always told me like you get butterflies, that means you're alive, but it's not necessarily nervous because I'm always prepared.
When did your dad tell you that? And what was, how did you embrace it, or did it come over time?
I don't think I was ever nervous because it was just fun. Football is fun for me, but I just know that I'm always prepared for the moment. I can just go out there and live with what happens.
It's hard to rattle this guy. Anyways, because of all this, because of his talent, because of his composure, this is what Sam Cosmi had to say about Jayden Daniels.
It's amazing the ability that he has to be composed under stressful situations. And, typically that comes with experience. And so him being a rookie, him being able to do what he's doing, I mean, all the work that he's put in, all the preparation he's put in, all the time he's spent, watching film, doing all that stuff has led to this in that moment. His talent has allowed him to do the things that he's been able to do on the field. So, I love blocking for him. I love that he's our Q, and it just brings a smile on my face.
All right, number 4. Let's get to the Lions offense. I think Detroit's offense is a lot of fun to watch. And it's so tough to defend. And the funny thing is, like, I was texting with Logan Paulson the other day, and just like watching some of the offense, like, man, they do so much stuff. This is fun stuff. And they put a lot of stress on the defense. You may not think it's quite as fun, but when you're watching it, like when you're watching the talent they have, how they use the talent, how they get to certain plays, how they get to certain how they create big plays for guys with speed, it's really good. So, we'll see how much fun it is to watch on Saturday night. Now, you can stop things, right? But this is a team that scored more than 30 points in 5 straight games and has scored over 30 or more 10 times this season. It's a really good offense, folks. So we all know that going in, but it is a fun offense, and it is a well-designed offense. It's a well-constructed offense and play calling, etc. So I think that's all good for Detroit. They have speed with Gibbs. They have speed with Jameson Williams. They have a veteran quarterback in Jared Goff who just knows how to play. He has 12 picks this year, but 5 came in one game. So outside of that one game, he does a pretty good job taking care of the ball. He's a very good quarterback. I think he's good. I mean, and it's good for him. He kind of resurrected his career going to Detroit. And as I go back to that culture thing and the way Dan Campbell is a coach, and just maybe the way he was able to reconstruct his confidence as a quarterback, and sometimes just believing in a guy. And that's sometimes all you need, because he came from LA, and Sean McVay clearly didn't believe in him enough, and Dan Campbell does. And sometimes you hit the right spot at the right time in your career. And, that's what happens. But they have a terrific offensive line. They have a very good tight end. They have a top wide receiver in St. Brown. They have a creative play caller in Ben Johnson, and a coach again in Campbell who knows exactly what he wants from his offense. They will trick you. They'll quick snap you. They will throw, like there was a play I can't remember which game it was, where I don't know if it was a Niners game, where it's the lateral, where it's 3rd down and just little hook and lateral for a touchdown to Jameson Williams. Just well designed. So you have to be ready for a lot of things. The one thing you can't do is get overwhelmed with thinking, what might they do? You have to go by what you know they will do. And they are going to throw some things at you that you're not going to expect. And this team will do that too. But you can't get overwhelmed by like the what ifs and just focus on the what is. And I think this team knows that. They've talked about that this week. And, I think Joe Witt talked about it. I know players have talked about it. I don't think they're sitting there intimidated by this offense. They shouldn't be. They're professional athletes. You can't be that. You're playing well. You shouldn't be that way. They're not. So, but I think we all know this is a challenge to stop. And somebody asked me on the private Zoom with the Gold members what offense this might compare to, and you could kind of look at it as like it's probably, in terms of what Washington's faced, it's a better version of Tampa, because you got a it's not the same thing, but in terms of good quarterback, good run game, good receiver, really good receivers. That was a big challenge. They did a good job against the Buccaneers and stopping Bucky Irving. Can you stop Jahmyr Gibbs? He's a different kind of dude because of that speed. I think you look at Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, Derrick Henry. There's some elite level play in that backfield, and you have a good receiver on the outside. So, they face the Eagles' offense is very multidimensional. Now, Jalen Hurts is not the same passer as a Jared Goff, but he's obviously a different threat in the run game. And so that's what powers them. So you've got to take that away, but you also got to worry about Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. So in other words, they faced offenses that are explosive before, and they've done a decent job at times, a solid job at times against them, and at least keeping the team in the game, giving yourself a chance. That's what you need. Just give yourself a chance. And, can you force field goals? That's what they did against the Eagles a few times. They forced some field goals. They gave up points, but you just have to score more. That's it. So can you do things like bait Jared Goff into a mistake? I saw Houston did that a little bit, sometimes with the way the corner dropped. Difficult to do because he just, like I said, by and large, he takes care of the ball. can you muck it up a little bit with the pass rush and maybe collapse it a little bit, maybe get a tip ball or two? Like you see that happen. It's not unusual. So I think that's what you're gonna have to do. It's a really good offensive line. It's going to be hard to do that. Will you have to blitz? Will you have to send the Frankie Louvu a lot? If you do that, you're gonna play a lot of man. And if you do that, you better hold up in coverage because they're coming. And I think that's a big thing. Now, the one thing to watch for is they cause a lot of hesitation on linebackers, and that helps Jahmyr Gibbs. Like he averages 3.91 yards before contact. That's remarkable. That's second best in the league behind Saquon Barkley. So can you get to him? Now, when I watch them have success, they will have some wider splits. I talked about there was a Jansen, and it creates some wider gaps. It opens up some wider gaps, but also it creates some blocking angles for them, and it creates some lanes for Jahmyr Gibbs. And I think what they do is they throw a lot of eye candy at you as well. So that's why at times the linebackers hesitate. When they're having success against them, you're able to attack the line. Can you do that all the time and get away with it? We'll see, because I think that's something to watch for. Eye discipline is key. You can't get fooled by the eye candy. And I think up front, you've got to win some battles. You've got to be able to get some penetration there. And I think that's sometimes it's just kind of coming in behind the play, but beating the block, right? And so there are ways you can defeat it. Like when Detroit gets inside the red zone, the couple of games that I was able to watch, there are times where like they can't do as much of that stuff because it's just more condensed, so it doesn't work as well. So you have to be a little more straightforward. Can you hold up in those areas? That's going to be a key to me, for sure. When I watched them play San Francisco, they scored, was it 41 points, I think, in that game? They got the Niners linebackers to hesitate a lot throughout that game. And again, it's motions, it's jet action, it's the pulling action, it's the talent they have combined with all the other stuff. Sometimes, one time I saw them, they split the left tackle out, then they motion then they have a guy from the right side of the line come over and plug himself in to get an unbalanced line on that side, right in between the tackle and the guard. So it's just, they do a lot of different things, and they create situations that are conducive to success. Watch for Jameson Williams. So one of the things they did with him very well is they would send him on first of all, he can beat your butt on a deep post, right? So I watched one game where he had like a long pass where the safety was just a little bit too shallow and too flat-footed, and maybe focusing not enough on Jameson Williams, because if he gets close to you, he's by you. Like if he's close to you and you haven't flipped your hips, just grab him now, because you're going to get called he's going to give up a touchdown, right? So you've got to be smart with your depth. You've got to be smart with knowing who is where and like who can hurt you. He's the guy who can hurt you. So what the Lions also do very well is he'll send him on deep crosses against certain kind of zone coverages, and they'll send a guy on the backside to occupy, not just to occupy the other corner, but to get him out of position. Because I saw this a couple of times where they'll hit Williams, like he'll come on the left side, get to the opposite hash. He's getting the ball, and the backside, he's being passed off in coverage, but the backside corner is out of position because of the route on the other side, and it just creates a lane for him to go around, and adios, because that's what he'll do. So you got to be careful with that too. So eye discipline is a big key for them. Win some one-on-one battles up front, and then that will help you for sure. Again, they get those wide splits, but again, it's up to the ends, the defensive line to get up there and make sure you're not getting moved off the ball. They will double team. They are good at getting the linebackers because they hesitate. So it's a tough offense, but takes one game, man. It just takes one game. And I think, is this team capable of that? Yes, because we've seen it. I'm not putting anything past them. You just have to know it is a really, really tough battle to play this team in that place. It's going to be an unbelievable atmosphere. But there are ways to get it done. Like I said, did I think they would hold Tampa Bay to 20 last week? No, I did not. Now, part of the reason they did that is because they were able to possess the ball. If you want to play that game, that's great, but you better finish with touchdowns and points, and then make sure you're holding them on those fourth down, because they will go for it. And what you have to hope for is that Dan Campbell goes for it in a situation where it's like, he's done it in other times and he scratched your head, but they make it, but this time they don't. You kind of need that to happen as well, because if it does, then that could be your break. That could be the break you need to get this going and get this offense the ball. I don't know if I would do this or not, but I'd certainly strongly consider taking the ball first if you win the toss, just to maybe, hey, You want to be aggressive with your offense, get out there right away, maybe get something in and throw the first punch and get it going and not let that place get loud. The flip side is if it fails, well, then you're kind of giving them some of that momentum and then they get the ball to start the second half. But if it succeeds, you throw the first punch, and now you can start to throw. Now you're throwing from a good, now you're playing from a good spot, and not from behind and trying to catch up. So, but we'll see what happens there. But it's just something to think about. And the other thing I know, like they'll obviously mix up their coverages. Washington will. One thing I watched them work on this week in is communication, but it's also like how they handle situations. Like Detroit is really good on a bunch formations. They'll run some stack formations where you think they're going to do maybe some sort of a cross release, but and so the defensive backs are kind of playing for that. But what they'll just do is just speed out with the outside guy, and if you get an easy 8 to 10 yards, they're really good at picking up those quick 5, 6, 8, 10 yard passes. They'll just take what the defense gives you because they know at some point you're going to give them a big play. And Goff, I think, is really good at one thing. He's good at getting through his progressions. He knows his offense very well. Boom, 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 check down. Now the guy has a chance to do something with it because it's Jahmyr Gibbs. So that's something to watch. I think I'll be curious to see how they do with Gibbs, who they try to get him, they try and get him on Frankie Louvu. One thing you got to be careful. Just in the past, we'd watch Jamin Davis last few years cover a back. And yes, sometimes it can look like it's a mismatch, but can you play the right technique to prevent the big play? And sometimes, most time, what they want you to do is force the guy to the outside. You get him to the middle, they're clear in the middle for that guy. That leads to a big play, and I've seen that with Gibbs. So just something to watch there as well. But also in the coverage, what I watched them do in practice the other day, they're working against a bunch formation, and then the Lions will motion the outside guy out. And so what Washington was working on is how you rotate in that situation, the communication that you have to do, the signal that you have to give, and then just the rotation off of it. And it was kind of like a half speed going through it when I was watching it, but it's something there's something they're very cognizant of, and they have to be because they will run those formations. They're good at running running guys off of that. So it's a challenge, but if you're a defensive player, hey, this is what you want, because if you can stand up here, what else there's nothing you can't do. So this is a great challenge for them. If I'm Dan Quinn, this is what I'm saying. Like, listen, you want to be the best, go stop these guys because you have the ability to do it. Go stop them. Can you do it? And if you can, you more than earn the right to move on to the next round. And then whoever plays in the next round is going to be, certainly not happy to see you, but I don't think they'll be happy to see anybody. They'll just be happy to be playing. Anyways, let's get to number 5. I think Washington's offense has a chance to do some damage against this defense. The Lions are banged up. We know that. And it's not like they did get linebacker Alex Anzalone back last week. He's really good. The defense is better with him on the field, but they're still missing some guys. And so I think that's the area. They have good safeties. Like, they have talent on there. Campbell's a good linebacker. They have good safeties. Brian Branch, Cooper Joseph. They have good players out there, but you can do things to take advantage. They can move the ball on them. Over the last 5 weeks, Detroit's offense. I'm going to read you some numbers on Detroit's defense over the last 5 weeks. Now, you take it with a grain of salt because, again, they've had some injuries. They've had guys back. But it is a defense that has had, because of the injuries. I'll be honest. Like, I think it's remarkable what they've done to get to 15-2, because it's really hard to do that when you've had the injuries. They haven't used those excuses. They went out and got Darius Smith. He's still a solid veteran pass rusher. Dynamic, no, but still can hurt you, or can help you on Lions, can hurt you on the other side. But in the last 5 weeks, the regular season, Detroit ranked 31st in yards allowed per game, 28th in points, last in opposing quarterback rating, and 31st in passing yards. That will make this game interesting. So in the last 5 weeks, they've had 6 sacks combined. So they might apply some pressure, but they're not necessarily getting home. So you will have a chance to do something. The question is, like, if you're at least condensing the pocket with 4 guys, well, now you're covering with 7. It's not going to be some easy game to move it on them. But that's the door that is ajar for Washington to push through to win this game. And they have a very good quarterback. We know that in Jayden Daniels, who can move the ball. And I think you can do the possession game type passing game against them as well, because I think that would help them. If you can possess the ball, get some of the couple longer drives, eat the clock, finish with touchdowns, you're going to be in a game the entire way. And is this team capable? Yes. Tough? Yes, but they're capable. And again, I think without Anzalone in there, their linebacker play definitely struggled. You go back and watch the San Francisco game, the linebackers were biting hard on the play action. So I would still test him on that because it wasn't like, Anzalone is a better player in coverage, is a good player in coverage. So that's a hard one to, that's where his strength is. So I think that helps them, but I would still test him in that area because listen, man, again, I know that one guy can help, but they have had their holes over this period. It's not just about getting one guy back. And I know he was back from Minnesota. They won 31-9. It was 10-9 in the third quarter. I gotta be honest, man. The Vikings, Sam Darnold did not have a good game in that game. And some of that goes back to the Lions. You give them credit for what they did. But I will also say, like, you go back and watch their red zone trips. I text with Logan Paulson. I was like, this is unbelievable. Like, he missed a touchdown pass here. He missed a touchdown pass. He missed a guy here. He's got a guy in a slant who's wide open at the goal line, and he's sitting right there. He's not ready to throw, doesn't throw it, pulls it down, and throws an incomplete pass somewhere else. Like that happened 2 different times. Then he misses the guy in the corner who's open, misses him, just overthrows him. So there was a 3rd and 18 seam route where he's got the tight end. He is there. It is there. It's a 25-yard gain, too high. So like that, to me, like, now that's not to say they would have beaten them, but I think if you had better quarterback play that night, that is a much closer game. And I think what all you want in this game, have a shot going into the 4th quarter, because if you get Jayden Daniels the ball and it's the score or less, or excuse me, it's 8 points or less, 7 points or less, you have to feel pretty good that something good is going to happen and it can be done. So that's the goal here. Get to that 4th quarter. Give Jayden Daniels a chance to finish at the end. This is how you can do it. But the point is, like, Detroit had an impressive win over the Vikings. That is, like I told you, Detroit is a really good team. But if you're looking for the hope there in that game, I look at the quarterback play and say Sam Darnold had a bad game, missed guys, and he also does not pose the run threat that Jayden Daniels does. And every team, listen, I always laugh and say, like, this team struggles against mobile quarterbacks. As defensive coaches will say, like, every team struggles against mobile quarterbacks. That's why teams like to have them. So one thing I did notice with the Detroit Lions pass rush, I felt like they're pretty disciplined. So that can keep a guy in the pocket. If they can do that, you can limit some what Jayden Daniels can do. I don't know that you can do that all the time. And let's see what happens when he's on the move, what they do. They will play man coverage. I saw him play enough zone as well. I think you can, the eye candy can work with them. I would try to change tempo, get some quick snaps against them. You see that, just get it to them before they can really communicate what's going on. I think, again, those play action passes, the middle of the fields were wide open at times for the Niners. The Niners just went chunk down the field. And, it's funny because one of the first games I watched with the Lions offense was against the Niners. And I was like, God, this offense is really good. And then you look up at the score and it's like, Detroit's losing. Now they end up winning the game. But the point is, like, the 49ers were in that game. And so this team can certainly do that. So they will blitz. They have the 2nd most blitzes of any team in the league. So Aaron Glenn is an aggressive coordinator. And they know how to play it well. I feel like it's a fairly disciplined defense, though. And like, so sometimes it can be hard, but I would test that for sure. And, I think the protection will always be a big key. And I think Jayden's got to know where to get rid of the ball because they will come at you. And if you're not ready, it could result in a big play. And that's the one thing that you can't have in this game. You cannot allow the big play early. You cannot get that turnover, or you can't have a big negative play early on offense. Because it's just in that building, man, it's going to be tough to recover from. And I think you want to try, you have to blunt the momentum wherever you can. And you cannot feed any of that momentum. And if you do that, you have a chance to be successful. I think, I look at Brock Purdy again with the Niners. I think he tested them. He did a good job with his eyes in that game. He had a 9-yard touchdown run where I think Daniel's got to pay attention. Like he ran up the middle. He keeps the ball live, pump fake. Linebacker hesitates, creates a seam, touchdown. So I think, they use the speed motion against them. That worked for sure. They had wide receivers in the backfield. That works too. This team likes to do that with Olamide Zaccheaus. And so I think there's a lot that you can do that can work if you execute well. So anyway, folks, see if I have anything else. Yeah, no, the only other notes I have down here is that Darnold just wasn't very good that night. Credit to the Lions. I think they played better, but he definitely missed some opportunities. And the other thing is too, it's a great opportunity, man. And one of the songs they were playing today in practice, it was Eminem's "Lose Yourself." We heard that playing walk in. I love that song because I think it's just, if you're an athlete, man, it's like, this is your one shot, your opportunity. Don't blow it. And I think this team is seizing that moment. I think they're excited for this. I think you should be excited for this. See where it goes. Again, this is house money, but it doesn't mean they're just happy to be here. They want to win. But I think for everybody else knows, like, this team is further ahead than where people thought they would be. But why not? Go get it. So anyways, folks, enjoy Saturday night. I'll be back after the game with another episode, wrapping up the game, talking about whatever happens, and hope you enjoy it, folks. I will talk to you next time.